The initial interview, Evaluation Strategies for DSM-III Diagnosis, by Robert L Spitzer, MD, and Janet B.W. Williams, DSW, ACSW. The third element in the series, this tape is subtitled Psychosis, Peeling Toes. Dr. Spitzer is Professor of Psychiatry, Columbia University, and Chief of the Biometrics Research Department, New York State Psychiatric Institute. He chaired the Task Force on Nomenclature and Statistics for the development of DSM-III. Dr. Williams is Assistant Professor of Clinical Psychiatric Social Work, Columbia University, and Research Scientist in the Biometrics Research Department, New York State Psychiatric Institute. She coordinated the DSM-III field trials. Dr. Spitzer conducts this interview. Commentary is led by Dr. Williams. This program is published by BMA Audio Cassettes, a division of Guilford Publications Incorporated, New York, New York.
You're now going to hear an interview that I did of a patient in 1971. The reason that I'm playing this interview for you now, I think, will become clear once you listen to it. This was a young woman who was hospitalized at the New York State Psychiatric Institute. I appreciate your coming on such short notice.
Fine.
Good. How old are you?
I was born 1939, so I'm 32, but I might be younger than that now.
And you've been in the hospital how long?
From Saturday up until today, which is a couple of days or more.
Right. You said you might be younger than?
Yes. In other words, I react as if I'm younger than I am. I'm 32, actually.
Oh, I see. Now, tell me what it was that led to your coming here.
Well, actually, I had been in Bellevue Hospital August 2nd up until August 10th. And this is in reference to my trying to move from my apartment. There had been a lot of things that had transpired, and they weren't exactly happy experiences. I was in the process.
They weren't what?
They weren't happy experiences.
They weren't happy experiences?
No, as a matter of fact, my toes, now they are peeling under the bottom. This is something that had transpired in my apartment. I was in the process of taking a shower, and after I took the shower, I noticed that, you know, there was like some sort of a bubbling sort of a reaction from the shower. But in the process of your working and rushing home from a job, you rush in, you take a shower, and maybe you're in the process of going out for entertainment or this sort of thing. Now, when I was in high school, I had 2 years of Spanish. I'm not going off on a tangent. My major was chemistry. I had a lot of chemicals in there because I know how to take care of myself. So there's a possibility that somebody could have gotten access to a key to my apartment, and they could have done these things because I'm not going to do anything vindictive to myself. I'm not a suicide. Am I making myself explicit?
Well.
Now, what's your question again?
Well, my question is, I'm not clear what happened that you had to come to the hospital. In other words, something
mean this?
Wait. Something was happening to you in your apartment.
Right.
Something about your feet. What was that?
Well, I'll show you. You see how my feet are? I didn't do this myself. Both of them are like this. And I have to use some sort of a Vaseline on them. And the other one is the same way.
And what did you think was happening?
Well, actually, I told you I had some perfume in there that some fella had given me because he was going to school and he was studying to be a chemist. Now, I had tincture methylate, I had tincture of iodine, I had hydrogen peroxide, you name it, I had it in there because, as I said before, when I went to college, my major was chemistry.
So, but what did
and
you,
anytime something would happen to me, I would always go out and try to take care of it so that I wouldn't stay out of work too long.
What did you think was happening to your feet? I mean, why did you
You mean what happened to my feet in the shower? In my own shower?
Well, what was your explanation to yourself as to what might be going on? You thought somebody might be
No,
doing
I didn't
this?
even give it a second thought until my feet started blistering and they got the water in them.
Right, and then
I was in Bellevue then.
Well, how did you get to Bellevue?
How did I get to Bellevue?
Why did you end up in Bellevue?
Because I had taken my luggage. I had 2 pieces of luggage. And I had gotten on the bus, number 100, going up to Riverdale to look for an apartment at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I wasn't able to work because I had these water blisters in my toes. But I said to myself, the best thing for me to do is try to find another apartment, being that I'm unemployed, then go to 181st Street and try to sign for my checks. And then that way, there was $100 that was stolen from me when I was in Bellevue out of my pocketbook. So, you know, and then you have your income tax, they're being processed, and you're supposed to get like almost $400 back from that. So you say to yourself, if you find yourself a better apartment, eventually you can, you know, get yourself established. Am I making myself explicit? It sounds kind of weird, I know.
It does sound weird?
Yes, it does.
Well, it sounds a little confused.
Yeah, but no, this is actually what transpired.
Uh-huh.
Now, in Bellevue, I was in there twice.
Mm-hmm.
August 2nd, I was in Bellevue Hospital, and I was back in Bellevue Hospital again around the 17th.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I had applied for one of these $3 lotteries. The drawing was supposed to have been in August. Had I won, I would have won $1 million. But as I said before, I was in Bellevue Hospital August the 2nd up until August 10th.
Now, this is the
And again, I was in there, right.
This is the psychiatric part
Right,
of Bellevue Hospital.
PQ1, PQ1.
Right, I remember that.
Right.
Now, why were you in a psychiatric hospital?
Because in the process, as I said before, in the process of me going to look for an apartment, once a policeman had taken me to you know, a hotel, and he says to me, because I had been running back and forth to the precinct, and so one of the policemen says, go upstairs and talk to the detective.
Uh-huh.
So I went upstairs to talk to the detective. So he says to me, what's wrong? Because he had known me since I'd been living at 162nd Street. But, I mean, there had never been any intimacy or anything like that. We were just good friends.
Right.
He says to me, Samantha, what's wrong? I said to him, I just got out of Bellevue. I don't have any money. So he says, well, what's the problem? I said, I can't get any money. I said, somebody took $100 from me. There was a lawyer who was working on it. He wasn't able to get the money back. Somebody, a half-sister.
Why did you keep running to the police?
Why did I keep running to the police?
Right.
What else would you do if you didn't have any money and you know, and somebody had
Well,
changed the lock on your door?
Oh, someone had changed the lock on your door.
Right, and you had your own keys before you went in there, but the
Now,
keys didn't
who do
fit.
you think had changed the lock?
It
on
was
your
a
door?
half-sister or maybe the lady in the building, the superintendent, that had something to do with it. You understand what I'm saying? It was either one of the two women.
Mm-hmm.
So, in the process of me going to the precinct, I spoke to the detective, and he says to me, he says, Samantha, he said, here's $5. He said, get back uptown as fast as you can. He said, and go to the motel, and he said, see if you can get a room. He said, because you need to relax.
You were very upset then.
I had just gotten out of the hospital, and I was upset again. They had they sent me from Bellevue Hospital to Manhattan State Hospital. And the psychiatrist says to me, Samantha, how old are you? So I said 40. So he says to me, he says, don't fool around. He said, how old are you? So I told him 32. So he says to me, you don't need to be in these places. I was over there about 45 minutes, and he released me and sent me home.
Mm-hmm. And how did you finally get to this hospital?
Oh, that's another long story. In Bellevue twice, right?
Right.
I was in there from August 17th up until the 25th.
Yeah.
All right. I went up to 181st Street because I had signed for a check because I was terminated or fired.
Why were you fired there?
Because somebody got on the phone and phoned Ted Bates and said, well, Samantha has been in a mental institution before. When I process an application, I never say I've been in.
Now that's not...
No, let me say something to you. The last hospital that I was in was Central Islip.
Yeah.
Dr. Conroy, and there was a Dr. Vargas there, and he had a wife, too.
Mm-hmm.
I had all these 3 psychiatrists. They said to my dad, it's nothing wrong with your daughter, and it's no need in you signing her out. We're going to make her sign out on voluntary status. And then that way, if she ever does anything to hurt anybody, then you could permit her again.
Can I get a word in edgewise?
What?
What I heard is that when you were at Ted Bates, you were a secretary there?
No, I was an accounting clerk.
An accounting clerk.
In the media department.
Right. What I heard is that you had some idea that there was something going on with electricity.
You mean in my apartment?
Well...
There was something happening in my apartment.
You went in and you kicked the computer at Ted Bates?
I didn't kick the computer. You know what happened?
No,
I used up all the invoice numbers. That's what happened. I didn't kick the computer.
What's this about electricity? You felt that there were electrons or something coming at you?
Electrons? No, that has something to do with science. No. No, you know what happened with the computer at Ted Bates? I used up all the invoice numbers. And then they suggested, well, actually, Mr. Long, who was in, he was like the head of the, traffic and media and everything else when it came to, like, Brown and Williamson. This is the account that I was working on. It's a cigarette account. And what transpired, the lady that was my supervisor in accounting, she didn't want to agree to change the system because they were going to go to a system like A for the invoice and M for the magazine and...
But you didn't go in and kick a computer?
No. This was something that transpired between Mr. Long and my supervisor. They couldn't agree because, see, my supervisor wanted to duplicate the invoice numbers and he wanted to change it to a new system where you use different invoice numbers. what you would do, you would have, like, if it was for magazines, you would have M, and then if it was the first...
so there's nothing to this business that you felt there was
no, it wasn't me.
Electricity being sent at you?
No. The only thing that I had mentioned was the fact that there was a little mirror or something installed in my mirror, and everything that I did in my apartment, it got back to the job.
Oh.
So what I did, I disassembled the mirror. That's the only thing that I mentioned.
Everything
to
you
Mr.
did in
Walker.
your apartment was transmitted through this mirror.
It wasn't really transmitted. It was like somebody taking a picture of you. And
somebody was taking a picture from this mirror.
You weren't even being aware of it, even if you were like with just a bathing suit on.
Yeah.
And these things were like being sent all over. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, now I'm beginning to understand.
So what I did, I
saying.
took the mirror apart, finally.
Yeah.
This was after I wasn't working.
There's a mirror at your home.
Right.
Uh-huh. And all these things were being broadcast?
Not
what were these pictures of
Not
you?
necessarily broadcast, just pictures of me.
Uh-huh. What about
and
your...
in the event, if you bring a fella in your apartment and he was in the bedroom, it was the same sort of situation.
I see. What about your thoughts? Did you have the feeling that your thoughts were being sent out?
No, not my thoughts, just these pictures.
Just pictures.
It was something like pornography.
I see.
You understand?
Yeah, now I'm beginning to understand how you were feeling. Were there other strange things that were going on?
What, in the apartment?
Well, around this time. Now, another thing that
the only thing that I was concerned about then was the fact that it was these pornography things. And I had two cats. One was Tabitha and the other one was Monique.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Monique was the one that was, like tearing up the place, with the curtains and this sort of thing. So I finally got rid of Monique. But Tabitha was all right. Tabitha was like a breed cat. The other one was like an alley cat.
Well, the other thing that I heard is that when you came into the emergency room,
Uh-huh.
you had a paper bag over your head.
Yes, there was a reason for that, too.
Let me hear about that.
The reason I had this paper bag over my head is because somebody had been going in my apartment.
Yeah.
Because the door, you could just walk to the door and open the door just like this, and then walk in and do what you had to do and walk back out. The door is still just so. Because when I was in Bellevue, somebody...
Well, I don't understand. What does that have to do with the paper bag?
When I was in Bellevue, somebody took some sort of a drill and bored a hole in the door. So they used one key. They gave me one key. Whenever you change a lock, you get two keys, right?
Yeah.
I only had the one key. Somebody had been going in my apartment doing just exactly
what does that have to do with the wearing
with the paper bag?
Yeah.
It had a lot to do with it because when I went in there, I was petrified because when I looked at my apartment, I said, well, Jesus, I didn't leave it like this.
Mm-hmm.
I was petrified. So what I did, I tried to clean up some of the mess, and I got so disgusted. I ran out, and I had this paper bag over my head.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
There was a reason for it because I couldn't find a scarf. And see what happened, I had a wig on, and I had thrown the wig away when I was leaving Jacoby Hospital. See, I don't normally wear an afro. I have a cousin who looks identically like me.
Yeah.
And if I don't, the only difference is that she's not heavy busted. Her legs are larger than mine, but as far as the size of the shoe and everything, the features and everything.
I don't know. So you wore a paper bag and you didn't have a scarf.
No, let me say something to you. She was a patient up at Medical Center, and she goes there. She had had a stroke when she was very young. She has to take dicumarol to keep her blood thin. She is almost like a vegetable. She's almost like Robert Kennedy would have been had he lived. She cannot take anything unless it's prescribed by a physician. She goes to Medical Center every Tuesday. Now, the only way that they would be able to distinguish between the two of us is that my hair was straight. I didn't have another wig that I could put on. I had thrown away 3 wigs within a month. A frosted
So this
one.
was your way of making sure that they didn't confuse you with her?
No, I was trying to, like, what I did, instead of going to, up there, I had come down here for them to admit me in here.
Right.
I came here first, but they sent me over to the emergency. And I knew I wouldn't have made it in emergency. That's why I came here, because the problems in my apartment were thus so. It wasn't that I couldn't cope with them. It was just the idea that I had no money to put a lock on the door. I had no money to buy food. I had some terramycin that I was taking. And I was taking the terramycin and drinking orange juice and going to this store saying, let me have this until I get $1.50 to pay for it. I would do the same thing with cigarettes. You understand? So I felt if I come down here and ask them to admit me and say that I was crazy, at least I could have peace of mind, I could get some sleep, and I could have food. Am I making myself explicit?
Mm-hmm.
Because I had phoned
So in other words, you decided to...
No, I had phoned some of my half-relatives, and they said, well, I don't have any money. I won't have $2 until such and such a day. And these are people that work every day.
Okay. What about this business that I heard that you felt there was electricity being sent at you or something?
Electricity being sent at me.
Yeah.
What you mean up at the hospital?
I don't know.
No, you know something? My feet were very warm up there.
Yeah.
And they were making one of these machines while I was up there. Now I had thrown out you know these scales that you stand up on and you weigh yourself.
Yeah.
Well, my half sister had given it to me, so I had bursted mine up and I had thrown it in the garbage the previous evening. So what they were doing, they were sitting up there making another thing, the same identical thing as what I had thrown in the garbage.
What does that have to do with electricity?
It didn't have anything to do with electricity, but I told them that my feet were very warm. It wasn't my imagination because I told you I was taking Trilofan.
Wait. What wasn't your imagination?
It wasn't my imagination. When you take Trilofan...
That your feet were warm?
No, it wasn't because I was taking Trilofan.
Wait a minute.
That's a tranquilizer.
Okay. You felt your feet were warm.
They were warm.
Okay, they were warm. What does that have to do with electricity?
It had a lot to do with it because when you look at the walls, you see open wires.
Right.
Have you ever seen a fuse box?
Sure.
The inside of it?
Sure.
Have you ever seen the telephone company when they install things and when they go there, you see how you have all those red, yellow, green, and blue wires?
Yeah.
Well, and this is what was there. It wasn't my imagination.
Oh, and that was making your feet warm. Right? Okay. Did you feel that there was someone connected with all this? That was giving you, I mean, you were having a lot of trouble.
Right.
Okay. Did you feel there was some one person or?
There is someone behind it.
Okay. Who is behind all this?
It's a half-sister. Because when I phoned her and asked her for the $100, she says to me, "You better leave me the F alone." Now, Frederick Newman is the lawyer that was trying to get the $100 for me, but he wasn't able to.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so some of the things that she has done is the electricity with your feet.
No, I wouldn't say that she did this. No, but I'm saying a lot of these problems.
What about the mirror?
About the door.
The mirror? Door. What about the mirror, the pornography
no,
with the mirror?
I wouldn't say she did this. This has to do with somebody else.
Well,
now,
about
the door. The door she might have had something to do with.
Who would that be with the pornography?
It would be an ex-boyfriend.
I see. How would they transmit pictures?
Well, if you go with a policeman, say 5 or 6 years, and then you decide to, we can't get along, and then he decides he doesn't want you anymore, and then when you start working for a firm, and you're doing fine,
my question was,
and you're doing fine, then all of a sudden he might decide he wants you back because you're making a lot of money.
Right. No,
so if you go with a policeman a long enough while, he could always go, not saying that all of them are vindictive enough to do something, they could always go, either a policeman or somebody else could always go and get a key made to your apartment, either one or the other.
No, that wasn't my question. My question was, I don't understand how you thought these pictures of you were being sent around.
There was something installed in the mirror because I took the whole darn thing apart, and you should see it.
Did you notice anything else like that, strange things that were going on? That had something to do with you?
No, this is something that transpired a long time ago, and I should have taken the mirror off a long time ago.
Okay.
But I didn't know this.
Let me change the topic a bit.
Right.
I understand you've been in hospitals before.
Right, several hospitals.
Right. How old were you when you first went to a psychiatric hospital?
Oh, I can't even remember, but it was in the 60s.
In the 60s.
I would say 62. No, not 62, because I came to New York 61. I would say like 64 or 65.
So you were how old then? About...
let me see.
What would that mean? 18, something like that?
No, I was older than that. I was about 23.
23.
23 or 24.
Right. And what was the reason for that?
Well, this particular time they said that I was a suicidal because I had gone up on the roof. But prior to me going up on the roof, well, there was some fellas that I went to college with. Because I always hung out with college people, And what happened, we didn't have an air conditioner and we didn't have a fan. This was 125th Street where we were living. So what we would do, we would go up on this, up the steps. It was like a walk-up. And we go up through this door, and we go up on the roof, and we take blankets and take beer and what have you, and we'd be up there cooling it. So in other words, I decided to go up there one morning.
So you think that was a mistake? They misunderstood what was going
on?
on?
No, what happened, they had one of these revolving fans. Not revolving, but it was just like something to sit in the floor. So each time that I would move the fan and turn it on, somebody would, move it some other place. So I just decided to go up the steps. This is when they decided that I was going up there to jump off the roof and commit suicide. But this is something that you had done before. So rather than argue and get myself all aggravated, I just go somewhere and, be by myself.
Let me ask you another question. Have you ever had the experience where you heard voices, people talking when there was no one around?
No, I never heard voices.
Never had that?
And I'm going to mention something else to you. There's a phrase, it's a parable where it says people that live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones, and I can give you a reason for that. If you live in a glass house, you can't throw stones because you break your own house up. You understand? Have you ever heard this before?
Yeah, that's a question that used to be asked.
Right.
I guess
Yeah,
you've been
that's
asked
one
that,
of them.
huh?
Right.
Why are you telling me the answer to that?
No, because these are some of the things the psychiatrists always ask me.
Yeah, but I don't ask that question.
You don't ask that question.
No.
No, well, anyhow.
It's not a very good question.
Well, I don't know whether it's a good one or a bad one, but I'm going to say this much. To make a long story short,
Okay.
if you've been in a mental institution before and you have all these things against you, the best thing for you to do is try to keep a job and work as much as you possibly can and try to save as much as you possibly can. When I worked for Chase Manhattan Bank as a bank reconciliation clerk, I saved $1,000. Nobody was
Yeah.
able to understand
Okay,
how I
let
could
me-
do it.
Let me ask you just, I'm
What?
sorry to interrupt you, but let me ask, because we don't have much time.
Right.
Do you think your thinking is a little confused now?
No, it's not confused.
not.
No,
Do
these
you
are
think there's
things.
anything wrong with you now?
No, you know something. These are things that really happen. I mean,
No,
nobody
but
could
do you think there's
understand how all
anything-
these
wait a
things could
second.
happen to one
Is this the way you
individual.
normally are?
Huh?
Is this the way you
You
normally
mean
are?
smiling like this?
No. Are you satisfied with the way you are now?
Yes, I'm satisfied with
You
the way
think you
I
need to be in a hospital?
But I'm not satisfied with the way my hair looks and my appearance.
Do you think you
no.
need to be in a hospital?
I would love to stay here because at least I have peace of mind. At least I have a decent meal. On the outside, I didn't have all these things.
I see. But you don't
And
think
I
there's
had
anything wrong
access-
with your...
Huh?
You don't think there's anything wrong with your thinking or your
My
feelings?
thinking?
Yeah.
No, the only problem I had, I mentioned to Mrs. Passard, I'm concerned about my luggage.
Dr. Passard.
Well, Dr. Passard.
Right.
I'm concerned about my luggage because I have all my important papers in there. It's 2 pieces of luggage and they're locked up. That's provided nobody has walked out of the apartment with them. Now, I have an Indian vase in there that I'm very fond of, and I have some black ebony wood elephants in there. Now, as far as the sheets that are packed in boxes about so large, those things could remain there until I get out of the hospital. But this is my biggest concern now because I don't have any money in there.
Right.
And my
listen,
keys are in there.
we're going to have to stop now.
And I have a lot of things in the pawn shop, too. I had to pawn just about everything I own
Right.
as far as jewelry was concerned. I have a jade ring that's in the pawn shop. This is in order to get money because I couldn't get anything from my half relatives. Now, the thing of it is my dad,
I
knew
don't like-
about this.
What am I going to do? We got to stop.
My dad knew about this,
Can't stop you.
but my half-sister, she says, all she does is sit up in the bar and drink champagne. Now, I only drink champagne when I can afford champagne when I'm working and I have champagne money.
Okay.
I drink orange juice when I don't.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, it was nice talking
Nice
to you.
talking to you.
Is that all?
That's all.
This ends side 5.
This interview so long ago, let's first talk about the interviewing style and how it might differ if you had done the interview today.
Well, I think there are many aspects of the interviewing style that I'm quite comfortable with and I would do in a very similar way. The main one being that it's important to try to always go, in a sense, for the jugular. That is, go for that form of psychopathology which is probably the most significant, the most severe. And practically speaking, this means that if you are suspecting the presence of delusion, something that indicates a psychotic disorder, that's what you want to go for. Now,
In her case?
well, in her case, I did have some information that she believed that there was something involving computers and that this was probably of a delusional quality. And that's why I kept trying to get her to explain this, and that's why I also introduced this information that I knew about.
Now that's an interesting aspect to your interviewing technique, that you really used information that you had from another source to confront her when she was not coming forth with that information.
Right.
Can't that be a little hard on a patient?
Well, I think in a way the patient is entitled to have you be informed as you can be. And so if the patient comes with a referral note or a previous chart that indicates something about the patient, I think it's your responsibility to know about that beforehand rather than, just looking at it afterwards.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also believe that if an interviewer does have other information other than what the patient's saying, that he or she is obligated to share that with the patient for the patient's confirmation or
Right.
denial.
And patients are usually quite comfortable with the idea that you know something if you make it clear what you know and where that source of information comes from.
Mm-hmm. I noticed that you frequently interrupted her
Right.
When she went on and on.
Right. Now, many people who watch my interviewing, I guess, comment on that, and I may do that more than many other people. My feeling is that very often, to make the interview at all efficient, to get to the kind of information that you want to get at, it's necessary to stop the patient from just going off into other areas. Now, in this particular case, I think we're dealing with what's obviously a tremendous amount of circumstantiality. I mean, if I had just let her tell her story, it would have taken 6 hours, and we never would have gotten to the point. But I think patients don't mind being interrupted as long as you make it clear why you're doing it, and if you do it in a gentle way. Sometimes you have to actually say, look, I know you want to tell me about whatever it is they're going into, but what I need to know is something else. And if the patient knows why you're trying to do this, they will usually accept it without any problem.
Presumably you also have to use your judgment and not interrupt them if they're telling you something very emotional or very crucial to them.
Sure.
Otherwise it could seem a bit brutal.
Right. And that is a question of judgment. The more you have some idea of what the patient's really trying to tell you, the more you're able to interrupt them when they're really going off on a tangent, and you're able to get them back. Now, in terms of the interview, those are some of the things that I guess I feel comfortable with. I would do them pretty much the same way if I did that interview now. In terms of the content of the interview, that is the areas that I asked her about, I would do the interview in a very different way now.
And how would that be?
Well, it's clear in listening to this interview what I focused on was the psychotic material, the delusions. The reason for that, well, there are several reasons. One is at the time that this interview was conducted, in 1971, there was a lot of interest in American psychiatry with so-called Schneiderian first-rank symptoms. These are symptoms that Kurt Schneider, a German psychiatrist, had suggested were essentially pathognomonic of schizophrenia. If these symptoms were present, and if you could rule out an organic mental disorder, then you could be pretty confident that you were dealing with schizophrenia. And this had a very important influence in European psychiatry, and in the 70s in America, there was this hope that maybe these symptoms really could be useful in a differential diagnosis of schizophrenia with, say, affective disorder. That's what I was really concentrating on, and I asked her very specific questions like, did she have the feeling or the experience that her thoughts were being broadcast, things like that. Actually, she didn't have the specific symptoms that Kurt Schneider spoke about, such as thought broadcasting or the delusion that your actions are being controlled by some external force. But I concentrated on the psychotic symptoms because in those days there was much more of the concept of schizophrenia, as we all know, was much broader, and the concept of affective disorder was much narrower. So although I appreciated the affective, the manic-like symptoms that she was demonstrating during the interview, I didn't really ask specific questions about, those symptoms, which I would certainly do now.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the symptoms of mania that she did seem to have.
Well, I think the most prominent one that comes across just listening is that kind of infectious quality, the expansive mood that she had. Expansive mood, of course, is the central A criterion in DSM-III for a manic episode. We don't have any reference to the infectious quality, which is what makes her so appealing, that is very different from what sometimes one sees in schizophrenia, that is a humor or what seems to be an elevated mood, but it's something that doesn't really touch you. In the case of this patient, you feel this quality that's so engaging, and although we don't list it as a diagnostic criteria, perhaps we should have, because it's always been known that this is something that is very suggestive of of mania.
Well, one symptom of hers that gives you that feeling is her pressure of speech.
Right. Pressure of speech is the other aspect that is so prominent. It's hard to think of a better demonstration. The way you can look at that kind of operationally is the difficulty getting a word in edgewise. Once you get her going, she just talks and talks and talks, and you feel as if there is this pressure to communicate and to tell you more and more. So that's very prominent. But there are many other manic symptoms that if you go down those B symptoms of the associated symptoms in DSM-III, we can only speculate. We don't know if her, for example, thoughts were racing, if she had this subjective experience. We don't know if she needed less sleep than usual. We don't know if there was hyperactivity, although you recall...
Well, there was one suggestion. She mentioned that she had gone to Riverdale at 6 o'clock in the morning to find a new apartment.
Right.
Well, one could infer from that either or both she had increased activity and decreased need for sleep.
Right, and
you
also...
could easily imagine her staying up all night, running around, doing all sorts of things.
Right, and it also suggests a not very good judgment, that her judgment was impaired.
Right.
So I think listening to her presentation, the expansive, infectious quality of her mood, the pressure of speech, the rate of speech is another interesting thing. There may be some subcultural people who have listened to this interview from Texas, as you recall. They feel her voice is very accelerated. People from New York sometimes are not that impressed. But I think most people feel that there's a real question of whether there's also a flight of ideas here, the rapid change from topic to topic. So a very strong case can be made that at least currently she has the features of a manic episode.
Right. One other symptom of a manic episode would be inflated self-esteem or grandiosity. Now, during the interview, she talked about pictures of herself being broadcast to her job and perhaps to other places as well.
Right.
Wouldn't that be an example of grandiosity?
Well, it might be. The crucial issue here would be, why did she think those pictures were being taken of her? Now, I didn't specifically ask, why did they select you? She had this delusion that there was, in the mirror in her bathroom, that there was some kind of a gadget that was transmitting these pictures. Now, it's true I didn't ask her why, and perhaps if I had asked, she might have given an answer that would suggest grandiosity, but I suspect more likely...
Such as something about her physical appearance.
Right, that I'm so beautiful or something like that. But I think that's unlikely. The sense that I got was that she really didn't know why she had been chosen, that it was a persecutory delusion, which did not have anything to do with inflated self-esteem or grandiosity.
Right, I agree. Well, in terms of that delusion, then, how would you further characterize it?
Well,
DSM-III makes a distinction between mood congruent and mood incongruent delusions. In the case of mania, a mood congruent delusion would be one whose content is related to the themes of mania, such as a special relationship with a deity or other famous person.
Well, inflated self-esteem.
Right, power, wealth.
If she did feel that these pictures were being taken of her because she was some special person or she was so beautiful, that would have been mood congruent. But we don't have the evidence for that, and I suspect that even had we asked the more specific questions that now in the 1980s we would ask, I think we would still be left with having to characterize these as mood incongruent. They were not accountable by her manic-like mood.
Right, and she had other delusions as well. She mentioned toward the end of the interview something about the electricity in the hospital walls making her feet warm.
Right.
I guess you would agree that's also mood incongruent.
Right. She said, haven't you seen those exposed wires, which she thought was which to her was obvious evidence that there was something happening. The wires were, I guess, causing electricity that I think she said they were warming her feet. So again, that did not seem to have any relationship to manic mood. That would be another. Now that was interesting. Whether that was a hallucination, was she actually experiencing the electricity coursing through her body, or was this a somatic delusion, which is more like what it sounded. She wasn't emphasizing that she could feel the electricity. It was more something that she inferred, that she thought something was happening to her feet.
What's the significance of a clinician making a distinction between mood congruent and mood incongruent delusions? That's something that's new to DSM-III.
Right. The distinction is that a mood incongruent delusion is certainly more suggestive of schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder. So,
in terms of what, a poor prognosis?
right, and there is some evidence that if you take a group of patients with, say, mania, bipolar disorder, and divide them into those that have psychotic features that are mood incongruent and those that have mood congruent, the mood congruent, the patients with the mood incongruent, in terms of long-term outcome, will have an outcome that's not as good as those with congruent.
Now, although DSM-III doesn't specifically make this point, in those patients who have both mood incongruent and mood congruent delusions, I guess the clinician then should note the mood incongruent
Right.
rather than mood congruent. In other words, those take precedence because of their increased significance in terms of
Right.
prognosis.
The question, it's in a way a hierarchy. The first question that you want to know is, are there any delusions that cannot be accounted for in terms of the predominant mood? And if that is the case, then that would be mood incongruent, even if there are also delusions that are mood congruent.
Mm-hmm. Now, I gather 10 years ago your diagnosis was schizophrenia.
Well, it was actually more than 10 years. It was,
right, it was
13 years ago. Sure, when I saw this patient in 1971, there was no doubt in my mind or in the mind of the people taking care of her on the inpatient service, this was schizophrenia. And that was because in those days the psychotic symptoms took precedence. So in the presence of bizarre delusions, that indicated schizophrenia, and the fact that there might also be an affective disturbance was something, that would be of interest, but it would not be diagnostically very significant. Now, what we've learned since that time is that maybe it's really the reverse hierarchy, that in the presence of an affective disturbance, whether or not there are delusions is not as diagnostically significant, at least if those delusions accompany the affective syndrome, that is, if they occur at the same time as the affective syndrome.
That must be why some people nowadays say DSM-III has heralded an affective epidemic, because the concept is so broader. Many more patients who previously would have been given a diagnosis of schizophrenia now will be diagnosed as having an affective disorder.
Right. Part of the reason for that may be that in some ways it may be better for the patient to, given the alternative diagnosis of an affective illness or schizophrenia, if we are in some doubt, we give the benefit of the doubt to the patient by first making a provisional diagnosis of an affective illness, since we do have treatments such as lithium in particular for bipolar disorder that are quite effective, and the patient ought to at least have the benefit of a trial of that. Now, that's interesting in terms of this patient, because her first admission to New York State Psychiatric Institute at that time, as I said, the diagnosis was schizophrenia. She was tried out on a phenothiazine and did relatively well, left, but then returned, I believe 2 or 3 years later. When she returned on her second admission, now was a different group of clinicians, and I guess people were also more aware of affective diagnoses. The diagnosis then was changed to schizoaffective disorder, which is kind of an intermediary diagnosis. And then she was hospitalized once again another year after that, and then it was recognized that bipolar disorder was probably the most appropriate diagnosis. She was put on lithium and did very well.
Would you say that then confirms the diagnosis of bipolar disorder?
Well, you don't want to get into a kind of circular situation where, because a patient responds to a particular treatment, say that is generally associated with affective disorder, that makes the diagnosis. I think it's better to make a diagnosis based upon the clinical features. On the other hand, it's certainly consistent with let's put it that way, it's more consistent with the diagnosis of bipolar disorder that she did have a very good response to lithium. Now, the other thing that is more consistent, again, and I guess I would put even more emphasis than on her response to lithium, was the general long-term course, which is that she did very well between these episodes of illness, and she functioned quite well. She was working, she had a child, and that long-term outcome of doing well between episodes is certainly more characteristic of bipolar disorder than of schizophrenia, where more usually, although not invariably, with each episode of illness there is intercurrent difficulties and residual symptomatology, and that certainly has not been the course for her.
Mm-hmm. I understand you have some even more recent information about her.
Right. In order to get permission to use this interview for the series, I tracked her down, which wasn't that easy because she no longer is being treated by our hospital. And I paid a home visit. She didn't have a telephone, so I had to actually go to her home, which is a good experience, I suppose. We had spoken, over the intervening years because I had wanted to do another interview of her, I guess it was about 2 years ago, at which time she was not feeling, she was kind of down and a little bitter about her life wasn't going so well for her, and she didn't want to participate in another interview. But this time she kind of greeted me with open arms, kissed me, invited me in, and I explained this program. She gave permission, and she told me how she was doing. Her daughter was there, and I think you would have to say that she was almost a little hypomanic. She was on lithium. She's been on that, which she says she needs, because if she's not on the lithium, she says she has a racing feeling, like she's kind of going out of control. But she was functioning quite well.
She was working?
She had been working up until, I believe it was about 3 months ago, when her father had died, and she had what sounded like a depression, which was rather severe because she actually had to go to the hospital for that. I think she was in the hospital maybe longer. She was there for about 2 months, which may have been longer than she needed. But since that time, she's now looking for work again and feeling very good. And so I think the long-term course is certainly far more suggestive of bipolar disorder than it would be of schizophrenia.
This ends the third tape.